Hey travel friends, it's Stoof from Travel SzN. Welcome back to our channel. This year, from June to August, we had the ultimate summer mountains road trip. We visited the Rockies, the Sierras, and the Cascade mountain range in the United States, and I am so excited to finally share this video with you. This is our full vlog of our summer travels. We are going to share our ups and downs, our exciting adventures that we went on, lessons learned, and just our general thoughts while traveling around the US for 2 months in summer of 2022. While you're here, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any more of our fun travel adventures like this one. So here's our map of the places that we stopped on our travels this summer. We visited 11 national parks. We drove over 10,000 miles in just about 2 months. We started the adventure from our home in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, took our 25-foot travel trailer with us. The first part of the drive was basically just getting all the way out to Colorado, where we started our adventures in Rocky Mountain National Park.
Strawberries and carrots and salsa from Moe's, yeah. There's also dark chocolate.
Which I wouldn't be surprised if the salsa has sugar in it.
Yeah,
And then strawberries have lots of sugar in them.
yeah, but this is better than eating sour gummy worms and Swedish fish and gas station
Which
hot
I
dogs.
saw you brought sour gummy worms from that thing last night.
We're gonna edit that out of the video.
No, we're not. Gotta be truthful.
And there was a heat wave coming through when we drove through Kansas. It was over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The tires on the trailer were pretty hot, so we were a little bit worried driving through there. We made it through Kansas, got into Colorado, where we stayed in Grand Lake to visit Rocky Mountain National Park. Hey guys, we made it to our campground. This is the first campground of our summer trip. It's called the Elk Creek Campground in Grand Lake, Colorado. While we're here, we're going to be visiting Rocky Mountain National Park for the next 4 nights. This campground is known for having moose that frequent the area. Do you guys like my hat, by the way? So we haven't seen any moose yet, but hopefully we will. And it wasn't too long before we saw our first moose in the wild. The next morning, as we were entering the park, heading north from Grand Lake, we saw a moose on the side of the road walking through a meadow, and we also saw herds of elk. We saw moose and elk almost every day here. The wildlife was beautiful to look at, but so were the views of the mountains. The southwest region of the park had these big open meadows with mountains as the backdrop behind it. And as you continue making your way along Trail Ridge Road, you make it all the way up into the tundra environment, way up in the mountains. You're in an alpine environment there where plants can barely grow. There are no trees anymore, just small tundra-like plants. And as you make your way through that alpine zone, you come over to the eastern side of the park, and the Bear Lake region is a mix of mountains, trees, wildlife, waterfalls, lakes. That is such a beautiful area of the park. And this is kind of a funny story looking back at it now. I decided to change my plans that I told Nate earlier in the day, and I decided to do the hike to Sky Pond. I was originally just going to drive out to the Bear Lake area and come back, but I decided, well, the weather's nice. That drive was pretty scary up through the mountains, so I think I'm just gonna do the hike while I'm here.
Look at this is amazing.
And unfortunately, there was no cell service for me to tell Nate that I was doing that hike, so I just did the hike. I didn't feel unsafe because there were a lot of other people also doing the hike. I was never really alone, but this was not the safest hike. I did get off trail still as I got close to Sky Pond. It is a little harder to follow the path. I got off trail and I can't find the trail. I'm using the Old Trails map and I have it downloaded, but it just looks like there's like a cliff. It doesn't look like I could scramble up that, so I don't know. Let me go back to where the trail is on Old Trails and look again and see if I can find the path. Somewhere down here. Looking back at it, I probably should not have done that, because when I finally got back into cell service range, I called Nate immediately. I had like a bunch of missed calls from different family members that he had contacted to see if anyone had heard from me. So he was back at the trailer looking for me, thinking the worst had happened. He actually started to call the search and rescue office, and he was on the phone with them when I was able to reach out to him. So luckily they didn't have to send any search and rescue people after me. He was very sad and worried about me, and I felt terrible. So I got him a 6-pack of beer, and I told him I would never do that again. So that was something I learned, to stick to your plans and make sure your loved ones know where you are.
In this trailer, some of these doors have issues. And so you can see right here, these screws aren't very well seated. And the reason is they use these tiny little screws to hold these hinges in. If I use too long of a screw, it'll poke out this end. So shorter screws, but still long enough to seat the door well enough. And now,
Yeah, it looks way better.
it's all solid again.
Good job.
While dogs are not allowed on the hiking trails in Rocky Mountain National Park, there were a few local hiking trails in Grand Lake that we took Duke on with us. As you can see, there still was a lot of damage from the recent wildfires in the area. While we're on the road, we both still have to work. Nate is a software engineer, he can work remotely, and I am a fine artist, so I can bring my work with me as well. On our last day in Rocky Mountain National Park, Nate was able to join me on our hike. Unfortunately for Nate, it was a rainy hike. He does not like hiking in the rain and the mud, but he pushed through, and by the time we made it to Emerald Lake, the skies were starting to clear and the rain stopped, and the walk back was very pleasant, and the view of the lake was incredible. We highly recommend this hike. This was my personal favorite thing to do in Rocky Mountain National Park. After packing up and heading out of Colorado, we drove all the way through the state of Utah in one day. That was probably the roughest day of this trip from a driving standpoint. It was such a long drive. And we visited all of the Utah national parks in 2021, so we didn't make any stops there. So it's like 9:30 p.m. and we have been driving since 8:30 a.m. Mountain Time, and it's 9:30 p.m. Pacific Time, and we just made it to our boondocking site in Crystal, Nevada, which is just outside of Valley of Fire State Park. We're going to be visiting the state park in the morning. This was our first time legitimately boondocking somewhere where you just pull off on the side of a dirt road in the middle of the desert. It was still a little scary because we got there late at night and we were in the middle of nowhere, and I will just say I did not sleep well that night. The next morning we woke up a little after sunrise and headed into Valley of Fire State Park. If you've never been to this state park, I highly recommend it. We just did a half day here, took Duke on a morning hike with us before it got too hot, and then made it back to the trailer for lunchtime. And we continued our journey to Pahrump, Nevada, where we stayed at the Preferred RV Resort to visit Death Valley National Park. Now, the Park Service does not really recommend visiting Death Valley in June when temperatures can exceed 120 degrees Fahrenheit during the day, but we were passing by the area and we've never been to this national park, so we decided we were going to see it anyway. We were just going to go do our hikes between sunrise and 10 a.m. so that we wouldn't have any issues with heat stress. So that's what we did. It was incredible. I highly recommend this park as well. It's just so geologically diverse. Hey guys, we are on the Mesquite Flat Sand Dune Trail right now. It's not really a trail, it's kind of more like open sand, like hike on the dunes, yeah. And it's a little after 8 a.m. and it's already 90 degrees. So we're drinking lots of water. There were a few things that we wanted to do in Death Valley that we were not able to do because we were visiting in the summer and we had limited time. One of the things we did try to do was the Salt Creek Interpretive Trail, but the horseflies had different plans for us. There are these massive, like, horsefly looking things swarming around our car here. We're at the Salt Creek Interpretive Trailhead.
I think it's clear.
Just slam the door.
Yeah, I will. Okay, ready? One. Oh gosh. Like three just
They're everywhere.
appeared as soon as I opened the door.
Look, they feel it. They can sense the air. Just close it. Just leave. Look, they're all coming right here. Stop it. Just leave. Nate, don't do
Oh
it.
God.
And these are the salt flats at Badwater Basin. After packing up from Pahrump, Nevada, we took the trailer into Three Rivers, California, which are the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountain range, and one of the entrances to Sequoia National Park. I think I could have planned our visit to Sequoia National Park a little better. We stayed in Three Rivers, California, took Duke on some local hikes on the days when we weren't going into the park. Although it's close to the entrance to the national park, all of the things that we like to do in the park were over an hour drive from that campground, and the temperature of the campground was about 30 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than it was up in the actual Sierra Mountains.
Saw that the average temperature was around 90 in June, and my optimistic brain was like, maybe it'll be colder.
It wasn't. It wasn't at all. Today the high is 106.
It actually is like the same temperature here as it is in Death Valley. Based on that, I don't think I would stay in Three Rivers again. It was nice and easy to access Sequoia. You're 1.5 miles from the entrance to Sequoia National Park, but when you're entering, you go through the foothills area. You pass the Foothills Visitor Center, and then you have a 45-minute drive of a narrow, winding road that takes you about 5,000 feet up to where all of the actual fun stuff and sequoia trees are.
So if we were to come back to this park in the future, we would likely stay at the higher elevation up in the Sierras. Once you're up there, the views are incredible. Some of the most amazing sunsets I've ever seen are from Sequoia National Park. My personal favorite hike in Sequoia National Park was the 4-mile out and back hike to Toccopa Falls. This takes you along a gorgeous little creek that has bits of cascading water and bits of the creek that are just completely calm, clear water where you can see the rocks right at the bottom, little fish in the water. The trail is surrounded by wildflowers. We saw deer and other birds while hiking this trail. And once you make it all the way out to the waterfall, you're in this valley looking up at granite cliffs on both sides of you. At the waterfall, there are lots of big rocks for you to sit and have a snack before making your way back to the trailhead. And what would be a trip to Sequoia National Park without seeing some sequoia trees up close in person? Here you can take an easy loop walk around the Congress Trail and make your way to see the General Sherman tree, which is the largest tree in the world by volume. If you're looking down as you're walking, you're going to see a lot of different pine cones for the different species of trees here. A sequoia pine cone is a really small pine cone like this one. You might expect it to be big, but they're actually really tiny. The last night in Sequoia National Park was spent hiking up Morrow Rock to watch the sunset. This was a great way to wrap up our time in Sequoia National Park before visiting Kings Canyon. We spent one day driving through Kings Canyon National Park, where we took some time to see the Sequoia Grove there. We saw the General Grant tree, which is the second largest tree in the world by volume. We continued along the beautiful scenic drive all the way down into Kings Canyon. Where we stopped for lunch along the river in Zumwalt Meadows. On our way back from Kings Canyon National Park, we stopped at the Buck Rock Lookout in the Sequoia National Forest. This is a massive granite dome that has a fire watchtower at the very top of it. The only way you can get up there is by taking this little stairwell that goes all the way up the granite dome to the fire tower. And this is not for the faint of heart. If you have a fear of heights, I definitely don't think you should do this one. Once you get up there though, the views are amazing in every direction.
So which one did you like, Sequoia or Kings Canyon more? I think Sequoia had more things to do. Kings Canyon's kind of spread out, so there's like the Grant Grove section of Kings Canyon, and then there's like the Zumwalt Meadows area of Kings Canyon, and then there's the Sequoia National Forest everywhere in between there with the beautiful scenic drive. And it does have like mini Yosemite vibes when you get over to the Zumwalt Meadow area. But it's definitely not the same.
I think I like Kings Canyon a little bit more.
Really?
It's really cool, Sequoia, to be walking in the groves.
Yeah.
But I think I like being down in the canyon, especially like where we had lunch by the meadow.
Yeah, that was nice.
So just sitting by the water,
yeah,
you know, the river going through there,
yep,
and the towering rock above.
So that was nice, but yeah, parts of Sequoia are really hot because it's the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains, and then parts of Sequoia are nice and cool, beautiful mountains. So Sequoia seems like it covers more range. Another area of Sequoia National Park we wanted to visit but did not is the Mineral King area. I had planned for us to do an 8-mile hike there to Monarch Lakes. And I was reading on All Trails the evening before that marmots will break into the underside of your vehicle and chew your wires and destroy
and hoses and
your vehicle. And now what people do is they drive over a massive tarp and then basically wrap their car up like it's a Christmas present in the tarp and like strap it down with tie downs and all that stuff to keep the marmots from getting into their vehicle and eating all their wires.
We didn't have a tarp big enough for our truck.
Yeah, we have an F-250 and we didn't have a tarp big enough for that. Yosemite's next, and that's my favorite, so I wasn't willing to risk our truck getting destroyed and me missing Yosemite. We sacrificed Mineral King and decided not to go there. So, if you are planning a trip to Sequoia National Park and you would like to hike in the Mineral King area, make sure you already have a huge tarp that's big enough to cover the underside of your car and come like halfway up your car so that you can wrap it to your car so marmots can't get in and eat your wires and destroy your car.
After our adventures in Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks, we made our way up to the Summerdale campground just outside Yosemite National Park. The bad thing about this campsite is there were no hookups. It was about an hour drive to get into the valley, and it was a really tight spot to squeeze into.
All right, so I'm about to try to back into our spot at Summerdale Campground, and this is absolutely the tightest spot that we have ever tried to get into.
The first morning that we entered Yosemite Valley, we were lucky enough to spot a black bear. Before sunrise, he was rustling through some leaves along the side of the road, so that was exciting. And then we entered the park, and the first thing we did was hike to the top of Upper Yosemite Falls. The hike to the top of Upper Yosemite Falls is very strenuous. It's more strenuous than I remember, actually, and I've done this hike a few times, but it is an incredible hike. It's one of the best hikes in the park, in my opinion. It's about 8 miles out and back with over 3,000 feet elevation gain. We did this hike early in the morning before the crowds came, and it was phenomenal. After hiking back down to our vehicle, we took a leisurely drive around Yosemite Valley, stopping at some of our favorite overlooks. Here you can see the Merced River with Bridal Veil Fall in the background. Here is the heart in El Capitan. Can you see it? It looks like a heart shape in the rock. And by chance, Nate was on the recreation.gov website where you book the campgrounds in Yosemite Valley, and there was a cancellation, so we were able to move our travel trailer into the valley that night. One day we took a drive up to Tuolumne Meadows, which is one of my favorite spots in Yosemite. At least it was. This year it was a little bit disappointing because there was an insane amount of construction happening. You couldn't even stop at Tenaya Lake, which is a beautiful subalpine lake on the way to Tuolumne Meadows, because the construction was one lane with a lead vehicle that you had to follow, and you weren't allowed to pull off and park in that construction area. Tuolumne area, as soon as you got there, that's basically where the construction ended, and there was just like construction cones and stuff all over the place. So it was a little less enjoyable for me this time. Tuolumne Meadows was always my favorite place because of how peaceful it was, and the construction made it a little less enjoyable in 2022. On the way up to Tuolumne, you should stop at Olmsted Point like we did here, and make sure you bring your spotting scope, because this is a great spot to view everyone hiking up the cables of Half Dome. You have a different view of Half Dome where you can see the side of it with Subdome, and you can see where the cables are, but only if you have binoculars or a spotting scope. They're just teeny tiny little dots for humans. For our last morning in Yosemite National Park, we decided to do the Mist Trail and hike to Vernal Fall and Nevada Fall, and then head back on the John Muir Trail. This is one of the most popular hikes in Yosemite, and it is much less enjoyable when there are herds of people going up and down those steps, so I recommend doing this hike not between the hours of 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. I've hiked this trail countless times, and it is just as magical every single time. And unfortunately, our time in Yosemite had to come to an end, so we packed it up and headed north to Lake Tahoe. It was our first time visiting Lake Tahoe, and we were looking forward to it. We stayed at the Tahoe Valley Campground, which was a little bit stressful at first. So we had a little bit of a dilemma here at the Tahoe Valley Campground. They gave us a site that's like a V, and there are trees everywhere, and there are trucks and all kinds of cars parked in the places where we would actually be able to back in. So what we had to do is back into this part of the V, and then Nate had to back it as far as he could, unhitch it, and now he's backing in right here from this part of the V in between the trees, and he's gonna rehitch it and then pull the trailer into that part of the V so that we can then leave the site. Yeah, start turning it to your side. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, you're still okay. So this is the first time ever we had to do this, but we asked for a new site at the check-in counter. So they gave us a new site. Luckily on 4th of July week, they had one more site available, and it was easy. We backed in and got it in on the first try. So now we're good. Once we got settled in at the Tahoe Valley campground, we discovered that we could walk to a brewery that had delicious food as well, so we did that, and they had outdoor seating. We could bring Duke with us, and we came back here a couple times this week. This was a pretty awesome spot. It was called Ale Works, and they had these dispensers that you could pour your own cups and sample and taste all the different brews that they had on tap, and it just charges you by the ounce. We stayed in South Lake Tahoe during the 4th of July week, so we took a bit of vacation time here. There were a lot of fun activities that we could do with Duke, lots of dog-friendly hiking trails, and some beaches that he could play at. He had so much fun running around, chasing other dogs, and playing with sticks in the sand and the water. Here we took Duke on a hike with us up to Maggie's Peaks. This was a semi-strenuous hike. It was only a little over 4 miles out and back, but it was about 2,000 feet elevation gain, and it was a pretty steep incline once you got close to the top. But the views of Cascade Lake, Emerald Bay, and Lake Tahoe itself were pretty phenomenal from up there. After South Lake Tahoe, we packed everything up and headed north to Lassen Volcanic National Park, still in California, but now we are out of the Sierra Nevada range and entering the Cascade range. Lassen Volcanic was so amazing. We totally underestimated how cool that park was going to be. I thought that was going to be one of the most boring parts of my trip, and it was actually one of the most exciting parts of the trip. The first thing we did in Lassen Volcanic was hike to the top of this massive cinder cone, which was really hard. It was just such a mental challenge because you can see the trail that goes all the way up this cinder cone, and it's really steep incline, and you sink back a little bit every time you take a step because all those little cinders and pieces of scoria are just kind of crumbling or pushing back because they're not compact down on the cinder cone. So you're working twice as hard to get up there to the top, but once you do, it's amazing. You can look down and see the little caldera-y type thing in the middle there. Someone created some rock art, a spiral with some rock art down at the base. And then we had to go back down the cinder cone on the opposite side. After hiking the Cinder Cone Trail, which was in the Butte Lake area, we got back in the trailer and drove over to our campground in the Manzanita Lake area, where you have an incredible view of Lassen Peak, just a short walk from the campground. Because I wasn't too excited about Lassen Volcanic, I didn't give us a lot of time here, so we really only had 2 full days in the park, which wasn't enough time. We need to come back to this park. During our 2 days there though, we split up our hiking trails to see as much as we could. I explored the Kings Creek Falls Trail, and Nate explored the Bumpus Hill Trail. I was also very impressed with the stunning sapphire blue of Lake Helen. This lake is over 100 feet deep, and it gets that beautiful blue color from the mineral content that comes from the snow melt that gets into that lake. And it is so incredible to see in person. The camera is pretty close at capturing that color, but in real life, that color is just such a saturated sapphire blue. It is so beautiful. After wrapping up our short amount of time in Lassen Volcanic, we headed north into Oregon, seeing various mountain peaks along the way, including Mount Shasta, which we just saw there. And we made our first stop for a half day at Crater Lake. Crater Lake also has that beautiful sapphire blue color. Crater Lake is one of the top 10 deepest lakes in the world with a depth of almost 2,000 feet. After Mount Mazama erupted only 7,700 years ago, it left this massive caldera, big empty bowl basically, and it filled in with rain and snow over years and years, creating Crater Lake. We did one short hike that takes you down to the lake where you can see it up close, and even do some jumping off of the rock cliffs into the lake if you're brave enough, which we both were. We were very excited. We continued our journey north to Bend, Oregon, where we spent Nate's birthday week. His family came to visit, so that was a lot of fun. We spent the first part of the trip just hanging out around Tumalo State Park, where our campground was. There are some nice hiking trails there along the Deschutes River. And we also spent some time just walking around downtown Bend, walking around the parks, the bike path, and checking out the shops. While we were in Bend, we decided to do a day trip down to Newberry National Volcanic Monument, which was very impressive. I recommend this place. The first thing on our itinerary here was to hike in a lava tube, which, you know, for me was not the most fun because I'm claustrophobic and I am not a huge fan of being in dark places. I really like natural light around me, and that was lacking in this hike in the lava tube. It was completely pitch black. They didn't have any lights installed in this cave. They just let you bring a flashlight in. It was about 42 degrees Fahrenheit in this cave. It was freezing cold. So you're walking to stay warm, and you're exploring, looking at all the different cave formations inside. And you can go about a half mile in before you reach a sign that says cave ends here for the public, and you have to turn around and go back the way you came. So it takes about an hour to go all the way out and all the way back. We also took a short hike to see the waterfall here in Newberry, and then we did a very exciting walk through the Big Obsidian Flow, which is a hike that takes you onto this boulder field, but the boulders consist of pumice and volcanic glass, also known as obsidian, the black volcanic glass, and it is beautiful. It's reflecting, and it's really bright as you're walking by because the surface of those rocks is so glassy that it just reflects the light on you as you're walking by. So definitely bring sunglasses if you do this hike. And if you are into geology or igneous petrology at all, you're really going to enjoy this walk. On Nate's birthday, we stopped at a local cupcake shop. They make these beautiful little cupcakes where you can customize every cupcake in your order. After grabbing some cupcakes, we went to lunch at a little food court area outside with a bunch of food trucks parked there, and everyone could pick what they wanted to eat and just sit together at a picnic table. So we had some tacos for lunch, tried some pierogies, they were pretty good too. For Nate's birthday, he really wanted to go tubing on the Deschutes River, so that's what we did. We rented some tubes and walked over to the entrance where everybody gets on the river, and you just ride the tubes down to an exit point. It's about 2 miles down where a bus can pick you up and take your tube and you back to where you picked up your tube and parked your vehicle. After enjoying some tubing time on the Deschutes River, we went back to the house, had some dinner, and sang happy birthday, and we wrapped up our time in Bend, Oregon to start heading north into Washington State. Driving up through the Cascades is so cool because unlike the Sierra Nevada range, it's pretty flat, like high plain type of environment, and you can just see these massive volcanoes as you're driving north. You just continue seeing one volcano, then you get past that one and you'll see another volcano. We made our way up to Rocky Point Campground just outside of Mount Rainier National Park. We were walking around the trailer, getting everything set up, and Nate noticed that there was a piece of metal stuck in one of our tires on the trailer.
I was doing some setup. We just got here to Rocky Point Campground in Washington, and I was putting the chocks in, putting chocks down, putting the X chocks in, and found this in our tire.
Dun dun dun.
So we don't know how deep that's going in there. We don't know if it's just puncturing the tread, which would be okay, or if it's actually
in the tire.
Yeah. So if it's in there more than like half an inch, it's definitely going into the tire.
We were monitoring the tire pressure and noticed that in 24 hours, the pressure had not gone down, so there was not an air leak yet at that point. At the next stop, we would get a new tire, just to be safe. We had about 1 full week in Mount Rainier National Park, and that was not enough time. I completely fell in love with Mount Rainier. It was my first time visiting this park. The first day was kind of a bummer because it was really foggy and we could only get a little glimpse of Mount Rainier from the Sunrise area. We did a hike to Frozen Lake and then took the Wonderland Trail back to the Sunrise Visitor Center. There's lots of pikas up here. Listen for them. And it was completely foggy the entire half of the day that we were there. So we definitely need to come back just to see the sunrise side of Mount Rainier. There aren't really dog-friendly trails in Mount Rainier National Park, so I took Duke for some hikes on local trails outside of the national park boundary. The second day in Mount Rainier started out a little foggy and then it cleared up. It was amazing. If you like mountains and you have never been to Mount Rainier, you need to go. This is one of the most amazing mountains I've ever seen. This was by far my favorite day of the entire summer trip. We hiked the Skyline Loop Trail, which is about a 6-mile loop that takes you through the paradise area of Mount Rainier. There's about 2,000 feet elevation gain. Mount Adams, Mount Hood, way out there.
I'm showing up.
Yeah. And Mount St. Helens. And it was just so incredible. It was so beautiful. I was completely inspired the entire time as an artist. There are so many things that I want to paint. I just don't have enough time to do that right now. But I could make an entire solo exhibition just of paintings from Mount Rainier because it was so beautiful. This is becoming one of my favorite hiking trails. On the next day in Mount Rainier National Park, we took a quick stop at Reflection Lake. And then continued along the drive where we parked at the Bench and Snow Lakes trailhead and hiked to those two lakes and back. It's about 2 miles out and back. This was a beautiful hike, but we were eaten alive by bugs. There were mosquitoes, gnats, biting insects, all kinds of that bad stuff. So next time I would probably wear long sleeves and long pants while doing that hike. The next day in Mount Rainier, we did more exploring of the paradise area of the park. We hiked to a couple waterfalls, hiked over the braided stream bed where we could see all of the boulders that river had carried and placed there, with a beautiful view of Mount Rainier in the background, still covered in snow. And since we were only about an hour and a half south of Seattle, we decided to have a date night in Seattle where we walked around the Pop Culture Museum. And had dinner at a pizza parlor. The last morning we had in Mount Rainier was super foggy at our campground, so I had low expectations driving up into the paradise area, going up the mountain, and I made it to Reflection Lake as the fog started to lift. I got some beautiful footage of the sunlight hitting the trees there, but Mount Rainier was still in the mist, so I continued driving. The mist kind of hung around in the valley, so I got this amazing view of Mount Rainier, and I did paint that one already. That's the first painting I did when I got back. We still had more on our itinerary for this summer trip. Next, we continued northwest to Olympic National Park. So based on how spread out the park is, I had a really hard time finding out where to stay. And the best thing I could come up with was stay in multiple places on the Olympic Peninsula to be close to those things and just bounce around a lot. You can't really stay in one place or you're gonna have a 4-hour drive to get to one of the things. Our first campground was probably my favorite campground out of this whole trip. It was along Crescent Bay, just west of Port Angeles, and our campsite was about a 2-minute walk to the beach. This was a dog-friendly beach, so we could just take Duke with us. He could run around and play. He had so much fun on this beach. And while we were staying near Port Angeles, we decided to visit the Hurricane Ridge area and the Sol Duc area of Olympic National Park. We did the Sol Duc Falls hike. And took some time to relax at the hot springs resort there, where the water is fed by natural hot springs. We also did a short hike to another waterfall, Rainier Falls. Once we made it to the Hurricane Ridge area, I had a fun and strenuous hike in mind to hike and scramble to the top of Mount Angeles. It's about a 5.5 mile out and back trail with over 2,000 feet elevation gain. The trail is gorgeous. The views of the surrounding mountains are stunning as you're hiking along this ridge to get out there. Once you have to get up Mount Angeles, though, it gets a little bit dangerous. There are lots of really brittle rock there, and you have to scramble to get up there. It's not like a walking trail, it's a scramble up the mountain on your hands and knees trail, and Nate wasn't the most comfortable with that. How you feeling?
No.
So we're on the hike to Mount Angeles, and views of Port Angeles are right down the hill there, and views of the Olympic Mountains are behind us. But this hiking trail had a lot of scrambling and loose rock and going up the hillside.
I don't want to do it.
Oh, you did
It's
it.
just climbing. Yeah, it's just rock climbing.
Good job. Thumbs up.
I didn't do it. I didn't do it.
You did.
We did some of
We
it.
almost finished it.
We didn't go to the top.
We were very close. We may not have made it to the top of that mountain, but it was a beautiful day, and we enjoyed the rest of the hike. Are the hills alive with the sound of music? Does it spin?
The sound of music.
As we were making our way back near the Hurricane Ridge Visitor Center, we saw a black bear. He was completely unaware that people were about 10-15 feet away from him until we saw him, and we started yelling, "Hey bear," and waving our arms. At that point, he got frightened and ran down the hill away from the people. And shortly after that, a man walking by asked me if that bear was a wild bear. So just a reminder to anyone that doesn't visit national parks very frequently, all of the animals there are in fact wild. The next day, we packed up our trailer and headed south to Potlatch State Park, where we were pretty close to the staircase area of Olympic National Park, and we were very close to Mount Eleanor, which was a hike in the national forest we wanted to do. So those are the two things we did while we were staying in that part of the Olympic Peninsula. My sister flew out to visit us while we were here in this part of the park, so she did the hike to Mount Eleanor with us. And we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into for that one. It didn't look that strenuous on all trails, but the hike was one of the hardest hikes from an elevation gain standpoint that I've ever done in terms of elevation gain for the distance that you had to hike. We were frequently stopping on those steps. It wasn't a bad view every time you stopped, though.
Well, only 1,000 calories.
My heart rate went to 180.
For the next part of our visit to Olympic National Park, we stayed in the southwest region in Hoquiam, Washington. From that base point, we visited the Hoh Rainforest and Kullalok Beach. In the Hoh Rainforest, we did the Hall of Mosses Trail, which is an easy, relatively flat walk through the old-growth forest where you can see beautiful species of moss, lots of different deciduous trees. We noticed a big temperature change as we came from Potlatch State Park in the southeast corner of the peninsula all the way over to the western side, very close to the ocean. It was about 20 degrees Fahrenheit cooler on the coast as the fog was constantly overhead there. This is a dog-friendly beach, so we brought Duke along with us, and I loved this beach because it is full of beautiful black, dark gray rocks that are perfectly rounded by the constant crashing of waves on them. Kullalok Beach was our last viewpoint in Olympic National Park. We headed back to the trailer and drove northeast to North Cascades National Park. When you visit a national park, the weather can have a big impact on whether you enjoy the park or you don't enjoy the park. Unfortunately, a massive heat wave came in through Washington State, and it was 100 degrees Fahrenheit in North Cascades National Park.
A lot of mosquitoes. And we're in a heat wave in Washington, so it's like, what time is it, like 9-10 p.m.? And it's still like 80 degrees. I'm wearing this hoodie so that mosquitoes can't eat me alive, and even though they're still finding my flesh. And we also have a little fire going here to help keep the bugs away as well. And we don't have hookups at this site, so it's hot in the camper.
Average temperatures are under 80 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer months here. So due to this heat wave, we had to cut our trip short in North Cascades. We couldn't leave Duke alone in a trailer with no hookups when it was 100 degrees Fahrenheit, so we brought him with us for the things that he could do in the recreation area. Hike to the Ross Lake Resort, which is a resort where you can stay overnight in floating cabins on Ross Lake. You can also hike to it and take a boat ride for $2 a person back across the lake to make your hike back shorter. I also thought that Diablo Lake was incredibly unique. I have never seen a lake that shade of turquoise blue before. It's incredible to see in person. As we headed back home towards Pennsylvania, we stopped overnight in Montana, where we enjoyed a beautiful sunset and watched Duke play with other dogs in the dog park near Bozeman.
We're on our way home.
Our next stop on the way home was in Rapid City, South Dakota.
Something happened.
What the heck happened? This cabinet
Well, this popped off. The shelf inside that holds our toaster oven and our Instant Pot completely collapsed down.
Wow. I mean, I saw like a little bit of these starting to get loose earlier, you know, like a week ago maybe. But they weren't like, it was nothing like this. Wow.
When we arrived, we opened up the trailer door to find that the cabinet right when you walk in had caved in on us while we were driving, so Nate had to fix that. The next morning, I took Duke for a walk. South Dakota is such a beautiful state, especially the Black Hills area. We visited Wind Cave National Park for the first time while we were in Rapid City, and we did the Natural Cave Tour, which is a guided tour with a group of about 20 people, guided by a ranger while you're in the park. Wind Cave is one of the longest and most complex cave systems in the world. On your tour, you only go through a very small section of the cave, but you do get the chance to see boxwork, which only exists in a few caves around the world. Boxwork are like thin little blades intersecting each other made up of the mineral calcite or calcium carbonate. The way that this formed is this mineral calcite filled in the cracks in between the rock, and as the cave rock began to dissolve away, the more resistant calcite veins stayed while the sedimentary rock that was there dissolved and eroded away, leaving the calcite veins boxwork that you see in the cave today. Wind Cave National Park also is home to prairie dogs that live in prairie dog towns and bison. And for our final stop on the way home, we visited some friends in Chicago. We went out and had Korean barbecue for dinner and then enjoyed some karaoke. And the next day, we were welcomed back into Pennsylvania with lots of construction and a rainbow.
We made it home! We just parked the trailer at the storage place and we are heading home for the first time since June 11th. Woo! Woo!
So to summarize this video, it was an adventurous summer filled with non-stop action and sightseeing. After this trip, Nate and I together have visited more than half of the nation's national parks. On this trip, we saw deserts below sea level and hiked snowfields along mountain ridges. We ate lots of pizza and drank quite a few IPAs. We watched Duke play and grow. We fell in love with some places. And we want to revisit some places where we felt like we missed out a little bit. And now we have all of these memories to stick with us for the rest of our lives. I love the mountains, and this was the ultimate summer mountains road trip. Thanks for watching, guys. If you have any questions regarding our vlog here, leave a comment below and I'll get back to you. Have a great day and happy travels!